Welcome back, adventurers. I'm your host, R.R. Slugger, and today we've finally reached the roof of the world. It's time to look at set 7417, Temple of Mount Everest. Right off the bat, Johnny Thunder returns in his suitable Everest attire. While he's the only member of our typical trio to appear within the set, he's not alone. Sherpa Sangye Dorje has come to assist him in this endeavor. Much like Bablu from India, at first glance, Sherpa Dorje appears to have both a set-exclusive face and torso print. In reality, only the torso remains exclusive, as his face print was actually reused over a dozen times. Dressed in dark orange robes and sporting a brown Tibetan hat, Sherpa Dorje is ready to discover what mysteries lie within the Temple of Mount Everest. Standing in his way, however, is his villainous counterpart, the infamous Yeti hunter Nyanpa. Nyanpa has allied himself with Lord Sam Sinister in return for a cut of the treasure they find within the temple. Sporting a mountaineering coat and sly mustache, both his torso and face print remain set exclusive. His black Tibetan hat really seals the deal on whose side he's working for. If the context clues weren't obvious enough, Nyanpa's name seems to have been sourced somewhat directly from the Tibetan language, roughly translating to a whole host of nastiness. Sangye Dorje, on the other hand, borrows his name from a more revered historical figure. Khatral Sangye Dorje Rinpoche was a Dzogchen master and reclusive yogin who advocated for a life of strict discipline. Living to be over 100 years old, Khatral Rinpoche passed into paranirvana in 2015, but left behind a legacy of teachings and practices still upheld today. Now, while I'm glad that the names of these two characters have some authentic roots at the very least, I'm not so certain simply lifting the identity of a renowned Buddhist teacher is the most appropriate way to go about it. Still, I suppose I did learn something new about a part of the world that I haven't visited, so maybe our Sherpa's name does play into one of the core strengths of the Orient expedition after all. We still have one last minifigure to discuss today. Back in black is Lord Sam Sinister. Though his outfit is as tried and true as always, he did spice things up by actually bringing an alternate piece of headgear. This pilot's cap, in black of course, should come in handy when piloting the biplane that Sam requisitioned for this leg of the adventure. Indeed, this aircraft makes for a formidable threat to the Hero's Aero Nomad balloon from the previous episode. It has seating for both Sam and the Yeti hunter, as well as a pair of guns for engaging the enemy. Beyond that, I don't want to comment on the build all that much, as we're actually going to see this plane appear later in its own standalone episode, just with a new coat of paint. For now, let's move on to the temple itself. Perhaps contrary to how I usually like to look at these toys in my videos, I want to start with some general impressions because I think they'll help provide a valuable lens to view the rest of the specifics throughout. Firstly, this is a grand Orient expedition adventure on a budget. There's simply no avoiding the fact that this set has much less to work with than its peers in this category. Corners have been cut in several areas in order to allow this kit the opportunity to deliver a satisfying play experience at a smaller price point. As such, we're going to be seeing unpolished cosmetic design everywhere. The backsides of rock pieces, exposed to Technic beams, missing wall sections, the works. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think there's a single angle you can view this model from where at least one of these issues isn't glaringly apparent. The Scorpion Palace at least had a couple good sides, and the Dragon Fortress is a masterpiece of this era no matter how you look at it. In contrast, the Temple of Mount Everest is always going to be presenting the camera some sort of flaw. I just want to acknowledge up front that my praise for this set is going to come with the understanding that this model simply attempts to do more than it ever had the means to. If I'm going to chastise other sets for fumbling in their delivery, then I've got to do the same here. There's a lot to like in this set, but boy oh boy is it far from perfect. Perhaps one of the most interesting design decisions taken here is how the model chooses to sprawl out across the 16x32 white base plate. The temple itself takes up less than half the available space, leaving a large empty chasm in the middle. This atypical silhouette is one of the defining characteristics of the set. It feels both empty, yet cramped for space on the edges of the base plate at the same time, a unique problem to have. Let's take a look at all the features of the temple in the same order Johnny would have experienced them. Starting on the wide edge of the base plate, we see a trail marked by various gray 2x2 tiles. If you recall, there was a similar motif on the front of the Scorpion Palace back in India. I think this trail helps serve as a way to guide our imagination, indicating the route he must take. Additionally, there's a place to store the 2 pairs of included snowshoes nearby. Now for a climb. Johnny has to get atop this white, little ugly rock piece in order to continue to the bridge. But I actually think this is one of the creative weak points in the set. Why attempt the climb here when one could apparently scale an equally sized cliff here and land yourself within the temple? I'm not sure there really could have been a better way to execute the intended play pattern within the budget limitations, but I did try to whip something up to help alleviate this issue. Only using parts found within the Yeti's hideout set, I fashioned a sort of add-on to the Temple of Mount Everest. This small addition fills some gaps and helps flesh out an aspect of the adventure that I felt was lacking. Once the cliff has been surmounted, Johnny is faced with a perilous rope bridge. This set actually marks the final appearance of this large element in the old brown color. As Johnny treks across the bridge, he'd better watch out, pull this pin, and nothing happens. Well, nothing happens immediately, but something could happen. Indeed, that pin was all that kept this bridge from potentially toppling over when handled. It makes for a decent enough trap, even if it does require some additional assistance to function. Unfortunately, that shovel trick the gang learned back in India won't work here, as the rope bridge card doesn't have a bypass item, meaning that Johnny will just have to be fast, lucky, or both to persevere. The looming silhouette of the temple towering over us is largely dominated by a 2-level roof adorned with a Tibetan finial or gadure. We've seen similar motifs in previous sets on Everest, but this is surely the grandest incarnation yet. As we approach the gates of the temple, we come to a pair of barred doors. Similar to the rope bridge, these door pieces are also making their final appearance in this color. Keeping them shut is a printed tan 1x6 tile with wood grain markings on it. This print actually originated in the Extreme Team theme, but this is the first time it's being used on a tan piece. Using the ice pick will help us pry the doors open and enter the temple. Since the wood bar is just floating loosely along the doors, this is one of the easiest elements to lose from this set, and sourcing a replacement can get relatively expensive. In a rather interesting twist, every tan part that appears in this set is either rare or retiring. I'll be sure to mention them all as we proceed. As Johnny steps into the temple, the next trap is not obvious at first, but it might just be the most deadly of the bunch. In a flash, a pair of massive axes descend from the roof and make short work of any would-be assailants. Their lethality is assisted not just by gravity, but by an elastic band, providing an added kick to the affair. This play feature is well constructed and satisfying to pull off, but I've got to mention that the trigger for the mechanism is pretty sketchy. It's all locked in place by this long brown lance piece. In order to spring the trap, you have to pull the lance off its mooring, and doing so definitely bends the part. This feels awful, and the strain put on this piece would not be tolerated in a modern set. It's a shame that one of the best traps in the model relies on such a dubious building technique, but I guess it's somewhat fitting that the Temple of Mount Everest isn't up to code. The designers of the board game came up with a clever solution for this puzzle though. By popping the snowshoes onto the end of the lance piece, it interrupts the trigger for the axes and allows the gang to bypass the encounter. This is really when the Orient Expedition board game is at its best, when the puzzles take advantage of the fact that we're playing with Lego. You may think we're done here, but the set designers managed to squeeze one more trap into the temple proper. This not-so-inconspicuous trapdoor might be a staple of adventurer sets, but this particular one doesn't operate in the predictable way. Instead of falling out beneath our hero's feet, it catapults its victims straight out of the temple altogether. This fun twist on trapdoor design is, in itself, activated by a twist. A quick turn of the wrist flings anyone unlucky enough to be standing on it into the freezing Himalayan snow. Interestingly, this mechanism lacks a technic bushing on the other side, meaning that with a little wiggling, this trapdoor can also function in the standard way. I don't know if this was intentional or an oversight, but it does add some additional functionality to the play feature, I suppose. In order to bypass the danger, Johnny and gang must remember their run-in with the Scorpion Palace and utilize an item we haven't discussed yet today, the map. By attaching the map to the corner of the trapdoor, it prevents the device from activating in either direction, another creative LEGO solution. This map piece in particular is set exclusive and highlights the second phase of our expedition. Once all the booby traps in this small structure have been thwarted, this yellow gemstone is the prize that awaits those who enter. Resting atop a very similar pedestal to the one we saw all the way back in the Crocodile Shrine, this marks the second time that the Temple of Mount Everest incorporates a motif seen in India, appearing for the second and final time here. Weird. Akin to the treasure chest in front of the Scorpion Palace, I think this gem also serves as a diversion from the real treasure awaiting those who know what item is fabled to reside here, the legendary golden sword of Marco Polo. In order to find it, we actually need to exit the temple and head to the base of it. Before we go, however, I wanted to quickly mention those noteworthy tan pieces I alluded to earlier. Both traps utilize these Technic axle connectors that, despite being common enough elements on their own, have yet to reappear in tan to this day. Similarly, this railing piece along the side of the temple would remain set exclusive for nearly a decade, before appearing one final time in a LEGO architecture set. Sorry to talk your ear off about these things, but hearing me fixate on all the little details that make up a set is the price you pay when you click on an RR Slugger video. At the base of the temple, we can see a pair of white rock pieces that make up the foundation of the mountainside. The larger of the two is actually set exclusive, making parting this set out more difficult than it already was. Still, the Temple of Mount Everest utilizes these elements well here, similar to what we saw with the Yeti's hideout. At first, there doesn't seem to be any apparent way to proceed, but the board game cards instruct us to insert the gem from earlier into one of these slots to slide the facade away, revealing the golden sword. Unlike all the other Marco Polo relics, I was surprised to learn that the golden sword isn't set exclusive. In fact, it isn't even all that rare, as it went on to appear in over half a dozen other sets. That being said, it is quite fragile, and the chrome printing will easily chip away over time if a scratch is formed. Best keep this one locked up for safekeeping. While I love the bait and switch of hiding the sword beneath the temple rather than inside it, I think this play feature is actually one of the weakest aspects of the set overall. There are no rail pieces like the one we've seen throughout Orient Expedition to help guide this mechanism. Instead, we rely solely on gravity to keep this rock piece in place, as it simply rests atop these tiles. This is entirely subjective, but some play features feel good and others feel bad. To me, this is definitely one of the latter. I think a larger part budget could have helped improve this element immensely. As it stands, it almost literally uses the minimum number of pieces to make this play feature work. Bare bones gives it too much credit. Within the revealed enclosure, we see this minimalist trend continue, with the sword and its pedestal being the only inclusions. I do appreciate the 1x6 dark gray tiles implying the existence of walls here, much like what we saw with the Scorpion Palace. However, this reminds me a lot of the Bandit's secret hideout from LEGO Western in the amount of vacant interior space going unused. Coincidentally, much like that playset, the Temple of Mount Everest packs a ton of features into a relatively small footprint. That being said, it somewhat lacks the finer details to really sell the illusion all the way. One point of differentiation worth pointing out though is that the temple does make great use of the medium orange color, adding a splash of vibrancy throughout that LEGO Western often lacked. It might seem like an odd comparison to draw, but these two sets really do give me similar vibes, packed with impressive play potential but cosmetically deficient in several areas. Still, LEGO gives us the ability to expand upon the stock set however we please. I'm curious to hear what ideas you have on improving this set. With that, I think we're ready to tackle the alternate builds on the back of the box. However, there's something rather odd going on here, and it's not the fact that the minifigures keep trading pants with one another. Though, now that I say it, that is pretty odd. No, the real oddity is that each of these two builds feature a large structure and a small flying vehicle paired with it. The problem is that either pair cannot be constructed concurrently using pieces from the set. The solution? Swapping the flyers of each pair. In the end, it seems likely that during the photocompositing process, the two aircraft were confused and incorrectly assigned. So we're going to correct that mistake here today. The first build I want to look at features a tall temple structure with sloped roof tapering away from the statue that looms over it. The brick-built face of the statue is a real highlight of the model, and I love the way the nose is attached. Clever. There's an idol, similar to the one we saw in the main build, overlooking the balcony, and I enjoy the way the designer was able to weave the medium orange color in throughout the build. Arguably the most unique aspect of this alternate build is how the doors to the sanctuary meet at a 45-degree angle from the face of the structure. This isn't evident at first glance on the back of the box, but I was pleasantly surprised by this revelation upon building it myself. Even though we can't see it from the angle the promotional photography was taken at, I figured the golden sword must be present within the building, so I included it here. However, in true adventurer's fashion, the treasure is booby-trapped, with a trapdoor releasing a pile of rocks onto anyone below. I've gotta say, this is one of the most satisfying play features in any adventurer's build I've covered before. The way the trapdoor itself just barely misses the tip of the sword and rests on the big ugly rock piece behind it to better angle the delivery of the payload is pure LEGO perfection. There's even a gap on the back to load the projectiles and prepare the ambush. The Scorpion Palace could learn a thing or two from this trapdoor design. The side build for this model is a flying contraption piloted by Sam Sinister. Despite having a detailed engine and fun use for the snowshoes included in the set, I think this is a fairly weak offering overall. The star of the show here is definitely the before-mentioned structure, making a strong case for itself in its visual design and play feature. The second alternate build makes great use of the base plate, sprawling out in the form of a mountainside fortress. In the center is a rope bridge protected by huge palisade doors that Nanpa can patrol along. These doors can of course be opened by our heroes, allowing access to the interior. On the inside is a multi-tiered platform and arched roof facade with a crystal displayed prominently at its base. The golden sword is back here too, but I kind of find it amusing how comically tucked out of the way it is. It's hard to even get a good look at the thing. Instead, it seems like this gemstone is the main attraction, and from the box art, I could tell there was some kind of play feature involving it too. The promotional photography obscures it, so I had to improvise a lever-activated catapult. I don't know, it's plausible. Along the edges of the structure are some alcoves in the rock walls that could be used for sneaking up on the encampment. This model has some strong playset vibes, creating potential for all sorts of stories to be told. While the overall details aren't as strong as the previous builds, I think there's still a lot of fun to be had here. Interestingly, there is a standalone pagoda-style model that is to be used in junction with the primary structure. Modern LEGO sets include standalone elements like this all the time, but this practice wouldn't really become commonplace until base plates were essentially phased out around 2010. There's also the before-mentioned aircraft, and just like the last one, it's pretty forgettable. In the end, while I feel this alternate build is slightly weaker than the one that preceded it, both make good use of the parts available and get a recommendation from me. Now, in addition to the models I just discussed, there exists another alternate build, this time hailing from LEGO.com. Back in 2003, the LEGO Group used to post additional alternate builds for certain sets online as a bonus or incentive to visit the website. There was actually one of these for the Scorpion Palace, but I guess I neglected to talk about it. Oops. The one we're looking at today, though, is the Race for Burning Mountain. Featuring 2 vehicles and the titular Burning Mountain, this alternate build barely makes a dent in the pieces available. What it lacks in complexity, though, it makes up for in theming. I love the idea of a scenario-based alternate build, and I think the blurb from LEGO.com really captures this well. Sam Sinister rides in his Jet Jalopy, featuring flaming exhaust and rear-wheel drive. He's got storage for snowshoes in the back for disembarking when he reaches the mountain. The front end of the vehicle is also propped up on a snowshoe, and, in typical LEGO website build fashion, it's an illegal connection that leaves the stud half-cocked. By contrast, Johnny's prop ski features a pair of skiffs and rear-facing propeller for propulsion. Sam lucked out and got the steering wheel from this set, so maybe Johnny controls his direction of travel with some kind of fan rudder? He also brought along a backpack full of supplies, and before you marvel at how it's connected and wonder why you haven't seen that technique before, it's because it's also an illegal connection. Nice. The Burning Mountain build really confused me at first, but I think it works well enough here. The top of the mountain can actually be lifted away to reveal the fire gem of the Himalayas inside. Overall, this little trio of builds is fun and thematic, but I can't help but consider all the other things you could have built with these pieces. There's an opportunity cost here that might be steeper than the Burning Mountain itself. With all the alternate builds squared away, it's time to once again return to the Orient Expedition board game. The setup for the Orient Expedition board game included with the Temple of Mount Everest is unsurprisingly similar to that of the Scorpion Palace. The puzzle pieces are arranged in a sensible way, allowing for traversal of the game board and the challenges within the temple itself. As this is a smaller set, there are less components this time around. Only 5 board game pieces as opposed to the previous 7. This does make things feel a little more cramped on the playing field, but given our experiences last time, we opted to make things a bit more enjoyable for ourselves by alleviating this restriction. We carried over our gameplay modifications from the last session, even adding a few more. I've linked our revisions in the video description should any curious adventurers want to follow in our footsteps. The Everest edition of the Orient Expedition board game still features opportunities to integrate vehicles, characters, and challenges from the other sets, utterly vague as it may be. We instinctively went with this setup, and it ultimately worked rather well for us. While I won't rehash the rules of the board game or recount our play-by-play here, I do want to compare and contrast some of the notable differences between our experience with the Scorpion Palace and our experience on Everest. Firstly, right out of the gate, I was pleasantly surprised by how enjoyable the experience was. While we agreed that the Scorpion Palace set lent itself much better to this game, the Temple of Mount Everest was no slouch, despite the difference in piece count. I was really expecting this one to go over like a lead balloon. However, despite the variety in the challenges presented here, there was a glaring flaw in the game balance that became ever so apparent in retrospect. Besides the invaluable backpack, there are no luck-enhancing items on Everest. Not one. 0! Instead, we're saddled with a few speed-enhancing items and weapons, weapons, weapons galore. It wouldn't be a summit attempt without guns. The real tragedy here is that this could have been so easily avoided by repurposing some of the items already present. For example, yes, I suppose you could use an ice pick to attack someone, but surely you're not hacking it for its combat potential. How about a boost to your luck to help safely stop a glissade down the mountainside? Makes sense to me. Had we not included multiple backpacks again in this playthrough, the Everest Experience would have been completely busted. Be forewarned if you embark on this journey. I mentioned this earlier, but within the temple itself are some seriously well thought out challenges. This is the core strength of the Everest Edition, in my opinion. Another fun design aspect was having to go back out through the previously dismantled temple with the yellow gemstone to open the way to the golden sword. While it is possible to force it open by other means, the game designers thankfully set the threshold fairly high on this one, dissuading anyone from going for a cheap victory. Overall, the Temple of Mount Everest board game suffers from the same ailments that marred its predecessor, but with the right house rules and group of players, it can still offer some fun over 20 years later. As always, the board game cards and puzzle pieces have been scanned and linked in the description. With that, the second leg of our Orient expedition comes to a close. With the gang gearing up for their trek into China, we'll pick up with them after the summer. You can expect an Everest recap video in the near future, just like I did with the Indian leg of the expedition. Otherwise, I hope to see you again when we do embark once more. I've been your host, R.R. Slugger, and I'll see you next time for another adventure.